and welcome to my library. I don't have any there they are, hands. My name is Rob Getman, and I'm going to be reading you the Ickabog today, chapters 30 and 31. Now I'll share it with you so that you can read along. Starting with chapter 30, The Foot. A month passed, deep in the dungeons. Ooh. Mr. Dovetail worked in a kind of frenzy. He had to finish the monstrous wooden foot so he could see Daisy again. He'd forced himself to believe that Spittleworth would keep his word and let him leave the dungeon after he'd completed his task, even though a voice in his head kept saying, "They'll never let you go after this. Never." To drive out fear, Mr. Dovetail started singing the national anthem over and over again. Cornucopia, give praises to the king. Cornucopia, lift up your voice and sing. His constant singing annoyed the other prisoners even more than the sound of his chisel and hammer. The now thin and ragged Captain Goodfellow begged him to stop, but Mr. Dovetail paid no attention. He'd become a little delirious. He had a confused idea that if he showed himself a faithful subject of the king, Spittleworth might think him less of a danger and release him. So the carpenter's cell rang with the banging and scraping of his tools and the national anthem, and slowly but surely a monstrous clawed foot took shape, with a long handle out of the top, so that a man on horseback could press it deep into the soft ground. When at last the wooden foot was finished, Spittleworth, Flapoon, and Major Roach came down into the dungeons to inspect it. "Yes," said Spittleworth slowly, examining the foot from every angle. "Very good indeed. What do you think, Roach?" "I think that'll do very nicely, my lord," replied the major. "You've done very well, Dovetail," Spittleworth told the carpenter. "I'll tell the warder to give you extra rations tonight." "But you said I could go free when I finished," said Mr. Dovetail, falling to his knees, pale and exhausted. "Please, my lord, please, I have to see my daughter, please." Mr. Dovetail reached for Lord Spittleworth's bony hand, but Spittleworth snatched it back. "Don't touch me, traitor. You should be grateful I don't have you put to death. I may yet if this foot doesn't do the trick, so if I were you, I'd pray my plan works." What a jerk. But getting good, huh? Now we're off to chapter 31, Disappearance of a Butcher. That night, under the cover of darkness, a party of horsemen dressed all in black rode out from Shoeville, headed by Major Roach. Hidden beneath a large bit of sacking on a wagon, in their midst was the gigantic wooden foot with its carved scales and long, sharp claws. At last, they reached the outskirts of Baronstown. Now the riders, members of the Ickabog Defense Brigade, whom Spittleworth had chosen for the job, slipped from their horses and covered the animals' hooves with sacking to muffle their noise and the shape of their prints. Then they lifted the giant foot off the wagon, remounted, and carried it between them to the house where Tubby Tenderloin, the butcher, lived with his wife, which was luckily a little distance from its neighbors. Several of the soldiers now tied up their horses, stole up to Tubby's back door, and forced entry while the rest pressed the giant foot into the mud around his back gate. 5 minutes after the soldiers arrived, they carried Tubby and his wife, who had no children, out of their house, bound and gagged, and then threw them onto the wagon. I may as well tell you now that Tubby and his wife were about to be killed, their bodies buried in the woods in exactly the way Private Prod had been supposed to dispose of Daisy. Spittleworth only kept alive those people for whom he had a use. Mr. Dovetail might need to repair the Ickabog foot if it got damaged, and Captain Goodfellow and his friends might need to be dragged out again someday to repeat their lies about the Ickabog. Spittleworth couldn't imagine ever needing a treasonous sausage maker, though, so he had ordered his murder. As for poor Mrs. Tenderloin, Spittleworth barely considered her at all, but I'd like you to know that she was a very kind person who babysat her friends' children and sang in the local choir. Once the Tenderloins had been taken away, the remaining soldiers entered the house and smashed up the furniture as though a giant creature had wrecked it, while the rest of the men broke down the back fence and pressed the giant foot into the soft soil around Tubby's chicken coop, so that it appeared the prowling monster had also attacked the birds. One of the soldiers even stripped off his socks and boots and made bare footprints in the soft earth, as though Tubby had rushed outside to protect his chickens. Finally, the same man cut off the head of one of the hens and made sure plenty of blood and feathers was spread around before breaking down the side of the coop to allow the rest of the chickens to escape. After pressing the giant foot many more times onto the mud outside Tubby's house, so the monster appeared to have run away onto solid ground, the soldiers heaved Mr. Dovetail's creation back onto the wagon beside the soon-to-be murdered butcher and his wife, remounted their horses, and disappeared into the night. I hope you all enjoyed chapters 30 and 31 as much as the rest of the book. And continue listening. Take care. Bye.